You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Before we get to today's episode, really quickly, I just want to say if you're a new listener, welcome. Please feel free to listen to the other 229 episodes that are available right now of this podcast. Most are good. There's a few bad ones in there, but that's my fault. But again, if you're new to this episode, I know I seem to, every time it's retweeted on social media or shared any which way on social media, one way or another, or a Google search, I always seem to have new listeners. And again, please feel free to reach out, say hi. I'm generally pretty bad at getting back to people now because I just get so many emails. But always feel free to reach out. I hope to get a lot better at that. During the summer. It's one of my New Year's resolutions, and hopefully I can stick to it. But before we get to today's episode, I also just want to say thank you to everyone who's reached out to me. I'm sure, as most of you know, who've listened to the podcast, I actually was friends with King Kong Bundy. King Kong Bundy was a professional wrestler and an actor who just recently passed away at the age of 61. So in my youth, I made a very terrible decision, and I signed up for wrestling school. And I ended up meeting Bundy through friends, and then Bundy and I became friends. I would not only help him promote shows in New Jersey, but I also would train with him at a school there in Jersey. Bundy was a very good storyteller. He was a really, really good guy. I have so many different Bundy stories. I feel that you should always celebrate someone's life rather than mourn their death. And there's an episode I did with Matt Burns, a.k.a. Sick Nick Mondo, which I'm going to link in the show notes, and that had a ton of Bundy stories in it. Someday I would love to just put down all of my King Kong Bundy stories, either in a book or something like that, because I just have so many, but that's a few. So I'm going to link to that in the show notes. I think that was probably about 15 or 20 episodes ago. I've lost track now. But again, I'm very sad to hear about the passing of King Kong Bundy. And if you really you're interested in hearing some funny stories about him, please feel free to listen to that episode. Just moving on to the Oscars, I know some people have, basically said it, what did you think of them to me? And I have nothing really to say about it. I didn't watch it this year, which is a rarity for me. I didn't really like anything that was nominated. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs and Mandy were much better movies that should have been nominated. That pretty much sums it up for me. But my next guest, I think he made a movie that will probably be nominated for something at next year's Oscars. My next guest is a filmmaker and founder and the head of the distributor SRS Cinema. His latest film, House Shark, is on Amazon Prime right now. Yes, I said House Shark. This is episode 230 with guest Ron Bonk.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
I grew up liking making up stories and acting them out with friends. Didn't have a film camera or a video cameras before camcorders really came along, and had always thought that'd be the dream, to direct movies, but didn't really take it serious. Think it was feasible basically. So went off to school for a variety of other things, but after doing it for a while, long story short, decided that, hey, I took the wrong route. The thing I wanted to do was to make movies. Meanwhile, though, I'd already had a bunch of years in college, didn't want to continue in college, didn't want to accumulate any more debt, and so started looking into what, how I could do this, and in the process of being self-trained, was learning about film and how expensive it was to make a movie, and was looking at a minimum of like $100,000 to shoot anything on film according to the best, sources, which obviously has been done for cheaper, but that's what I was, hearing, pretty much across the board at the time. And then eventually came across the idea of shooting on, camcorders, which had become more prevalent, and they were still pretty expensive, and not as user friendly, as they would come to be. But they, I think the first one I got was $2,500, $3,500. It was an VHS camcorder. I mean, it was a solid machine. Did a good job, but it created an option for me. Maybe it wasn't that much. It's just been so long. Maybe it was like 1,000 to 1,500. But anyways, I got that and started making movies on video, and proceeded from there. I've only shot a little bit of stuff on film. Never anything that was released. Was a little bit in my college, in my college years. When I decided to become a filmmaker, I took a few film classes, but for the most part. Went from the analog video to digital nowadays, shooting on HD for She Kills and 4K for House Shark.
So when you were in college, Ron, did you actually try to film on campus at all? Like, did you try to grab any of the equipment from the AV studio or anything? Just try to film anything there?
No, what had happened is I had, I guess a little bit. I'd been to school for 4 years. I had associates in accounting. I was working on a criminal justice degree when I decided to switch over to film. So I went to a 5th year of school, but it was just a community college that had TV and basically TV classes there. So I was using their camcorders and their VCRs. They had high-end decks. Might have been shooting on some Betacam for the TV stuff, the studio stuff, but was able to borrow their camcorder to shoot on VHS off campus. But I also took that was in Monroe Community College in Rochester, but at Brockport nearby, I took a single film class each semester, and we were shooting on film for that. So they had a Bolex 60mm camera that we can borrow. But the two things I shot on film. They both, I think I shot them almost exclusively within the apartments I was renting at the time. So, and then the stuff I shot with video, I remember doing some exterior stuff of the apartments, I was renting, rented I think a different one each semester. No, maybe it was one over both semesters. But no, I didn't really get down into the school unless, there was stuff we were doing for the TV classes around the school. So it was a very short period. Didn't really do a lot there. I mean, I really didn't get out there with a camcorder until I was out of school, working full time in the antique business and had invested in the camcorder. And I shot an instructional video first. I was down in Florida for half the year. And then once I got back, shot my first feature, and that's when I really, for the first time, got out and was being artistic with a camera, on a regular basis.
So Ron, when you made the change from accounting and with a criminal justice background to wanting to just go into film, were people would they say to you, "Hey, Ron, you're nuts," or "Hey, Ron, what the hell are you thinking?"
More so back then, but. Nowadays, not so much. I mean, there's still, for this area, there's still people will be surprised. But Syracuse has grown. The film community has grown, and there's it's not that uncommon for there to be a sizable production in the area, a few times a year. So if I say, I make movies, I produce and distribute features. I don't get back when I started off, I'd always get pornos, no, they're low budget, horror movies, and a lot of people weren't educated, or still aren't even educated, to the fact that you could shoot on consumer brand, VHS cameras and distribute those movies, during the 80s, late 80s and 90s. But nowadays, like I said, if I mention it, it's still treated with surprise, maybe a little bit of skepticism, but most part it's more like, oh yeah, cool, and then I'll usually get a follow up with, are you part of this production that they might have read about recently, in the area or something like that?
That's where you should say, the hell yeah, I am. So, because when I used to film in parks and stuff like that, people would, they see you with a camera. Whenever you, and I'm not talking about a DSLR, but I'm talking about anything that looks like a camcorder, you know, like a bigger variety of the camcorders, whether it be mini DV or digital, people associate that with like professional grade cameras. As soon as they see that, it's like, oh my God, this guy must know what he's doing. But, you know, when they're talking to me, little do they know that I'm a complete lunatic. So what happens is, so when I'm out filming stuff, you know, no matter what it was, people would stop and they'd say, "Oh my God, are you filming some kind of movie?" And I would just say, "Oh hell yeah, Mick!" You know, no matter what, you know what, I would just be like, "Yeah, man, why not?"
I adjust to the. You got to almost be like a chameleon, you know. So I'll adjust to whatever the setting is. So if I'm just, you know, say I'm meeting someone in a casual setting, I'll be more clear about what I do. But if I'm out at the park and someone seems interested, I might be like, yeah, I'm shooting a movie, you know, or I'm shooting a documentary, or yes, I am part of this group, or for years I can get away with like, oh, it's a college film, you know, if cops are interested, you know, anything. So yeah, you kind of it's kind of like, you know, he's equated to the Ed Wood movie when he was trying to, you know, get the church to, you know, fund his production, and he would tell them whatever they needed to hear in order to get that money. It would basically tell people whatever you think they need to hear in order to be able to keep shooting, you know?
Yeah, that's so true. And, you know, that's one of the benefits of being in college or just out of college. You can always say, hey, I'm just shooting a student film. And usually everyone's kind of cool with that. And like, oh, you're a student. All right, we'll be a little more lenient on you. Or if you call a location up and you're like, hey, you know, I'm a senior in college. I need some help with this. You know, people are, you know, a little more willing to help. You know, you should want to get away with that and use that card as much as you can.
Sure, yeah. I told my nephew's getting ready to. He's finishing up his senior year, and he's getting ready to. You know, he wants to gear up and do his first feature. It's called Blind Cop 2, and there's no Blind Cop 1. It's just called Blind Cop 2. And I told him to use that as much as possible, and he was like, really? Won't people, like, you know, not view that as being professional and stuff? And I told him the same thing. I said, you know, you tell people you're doing a college, you know, you're a college student making a college, you know, project or working on a college, you know, assignment, and, you know, they're going to be more forgiving, more willing to work with you, more, you know, willing to let you get away with more, as opposed to being like, no, this is a professional feature. Then suddenly, you know, it could change to anything like, oh, okay, well, how much are you going to pay me, you know, to use my location or whatever, you know.
And he also has the built-in excuse too of I don't know. So somebody goes, "Hey, listen,
exactly,
you can't be filming Blind Cop 2 out here," and he can go, "Hey, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'm just a student." So it's like it's such a great get out of jail free card.
Oh yeah, definitely. It works with the you know, everywhere from like you said, businesses to the police. You know, like, hey, you got a permit? You know, do you have permission to go into there? Oh, I thought it was public area. I'm just a college student. You know?
Yeah.
And then most time, you know, you can get away with it, so you can take that risk and hope, you know, hey, I'm gonna give it a try, get in and out of there as quick as I can, and get some cool production values. Yeah,
exactly right. And then, you know, you can always say you're shooting a documentary. So it's kind of like, I'm just shooting this documentary. But you know, when you were in college and you were, you know, filming things in your apartment and just using the locations you had, you know, at what point did you, you know, start to say, because I know you mentioned you were in the antiquing business and you kind of, you know, bought the camera. So at what point did you start really taking this seriously?
I mean, I was taking it seriously when I was, you know, in college. I hadn't yet determined that, you know, that last year of college, I hadn't yet determined that I was going to start making movies on camcorders. I remember even talking to someone in college about shooting on camcorders, and they immediately, you know, it was like a fellow student, but they'd been taking it for a few more years, you know, they were actually in film class, and they're, oh, no, you can't shoot on camcorders. So it pretty much dismissed it. But, I mean, I was, you know, looking at it as like, okay, how can I go out there and turn this into a living and also, you know, make the movies that I wanted to make, you know, because I could easily gone down the route of, you know, shooting pornos or shooting wedding videos every weekend, you know, and both potentially have a lot of, you know, like a good income in them, but they weren't, you know, something that was true to my heart. So I was like, how can I turn this to a living? And, you know, initially it was I'm going to make something so amazing that, Hollywood would be paying me to sit out in Syracuse, New York, and make indie films that I wanted to, with the stories I wanted to tell, to, reaching the point after the first one was done being like, there's not really, any distributor I want to give my movie to that I would trust that I'd ever see another penny out. So I need to become a distributor too and release my own stuff. And that's how it's gone ever since. I might license out parts of the movies or certain media rights, or do my own initial release and then a wider release of someone else. But I still will make my movies and then do the initial launch on my own. And lately, with the last couple pictures, the initial launch is at least paid for the production, if not more.
You mentioned, people who like shoot wedding videos every weekend. I had a friend who used to do that, where he would do it part-time, he called it. He would just go shoot a couple things on the weekend, and he would always be like, hey, look, I'm going to make a movie, this and that. And he ended up where the wedding video gig ended up becoming his full-time job. And he was just, every weekend, he was shooting a new wedding, and he never actually made a movie. So it's very easy. It's good you probably avoided that trap, because it's very easy to kind of get, sucked into that. You know what I mean? Yeah,
you can go right down that rabbit hole, and it's hard to turn away from that kind of money. And the weddings are weekends. That's usually the ideal time to shoot if you're doing low budget, features. Is you have weekends off. People you want to work on the movies have weekends off. So unless you're going to take 3 or 4 week stretch off from weddings and just shoot a feature. And it seems like it's doable. It seems like it's something that should be possible if you really want to make a feature. But it's like, having a job, and paying, regular job, and paying your bills every day. It's easy to be like, well, I won't work on the movies today because I need to, all my bills aren't paid this month, or I want to be able to go on vacation, or my kids need new clothes, or whatever, So it's easier said than done.
Yeah, very true. And that's why, and I'm glad you didn't go that route. And I also, I had an option to go that route, and I was like, hell with that. I made many mistakes in my life, Ron, but that's not one of them. Just to start with, with your career, just starting back with like, City of Vampires, even to now, making, She Kills and House Shark. What are some of the strategies that you've used, when you're approaching about, writing and producing these films?
Strategies, let me think. I mean, most of the movies that I've made, pretty much all of them, start off with an idea that I liked for some reason, within the story, and said, okay, I'm going to write this out. And and there's been scripts that I've written that I've never made, and some I've always dreamed of, maybe didn't have the money. Some, I wrote and just said, I wasn't into, or later, I planned to come back to and decided I was no longer into or want to tell that story. But if I finished the script and I really was happy with it, then I was like, okay, this is the next thing I want to make. And then you would go through the process of making it. So there wasn't necessarily, nowadays sometimes I'd look for the strategy as far as like the stuff I produce, where I'll go, okay, if I'm going to put money into this, I want it to sell, So if it's a movie I'm producing from afar, then there has to be more of a financial basis behind it. If it's a movie I make for myself, then it's more of like, hey, this is a story I want to tell, and I don't care if it fits financially into anything. And you're lucky when that stuff crosses over. It doesn't always, but sometimes you just rely on a movie to hopefully come out extra cool, and it builds its own fan base and does reasonably well, generates at least a modest profit. And I've been lucky with, the last two, She Kills and House Shark, that they both were able to do that. She Kills was a grindhouse movie, when there had already been a lot of grindhouse type movies out there, so the market was pretty saturated. If I'd made it a few years earlier, it would have had a lot more potential. It would have, it would have been a bigger release than it was, but it's still, people responded to it well. I had people who were fans of my work for years, but this was something vastly different than I'd done before. But the fans spread, good words about it, and continues to sell and continues to build, and was able to recoup before I went even into the wide release. And House Shark, people loved the idea, and they happened to be the most marketable idea that I had come up with. But I'd always wanted to do a Jaws movie, so I wasn't doing it because I was like, this is going to be a big money maker. I was doing it because it was a story I wanted to tell. And it was definitely, the most expensive movie that I directed myself, and I was lucky that the campaign basically made enough money back to cover the cost of making it. And then thanks to some outside sales, I was able to cover the cost of running all the media, because people don't realize when you do like an Indiegogo campaign, you might make, say you got I had like 21,000 in the House Shark, and we did like 22,000. So, with all their fees and stuff, the production was paid for, but then it was like another 10 grand. I think it was actually 12 grand in all the stuff that had to be made for the campaign. We ended up doing, full printed Blu-rays and DVDs, fully replicated, VHS, and all these extras that I kept adding as stretch goals, like stickers and pins and patches and stuff like that. And, once I got all that stuff done, the extra, sales I had were like, okay, I'm pretty much back to even. So whatever didn't sell from the campaign, I keep selling this bonus money. And I was lucky enough to get it like into Walmart and stuff, and have it do well in wide release. But I mean, it came out in August of last year, and just a few weeks ago, I actually got my first check from the wide release. So I've had like this modest profit from it, but then I finally got the first check from like the Walmart deal and all the other sales around there, because all the money it cost to release it and all the money to get into Walmart and stuff like that basically ate up all my profits, for like half a year that I had come in distribution. So I was living off, all the limited release I do and all the stuff I do direct with fans and any additional House Shark sales and the other movies that I made and stuff like that. And then to finally see, and so much it was eaten up, it was still worth it overall, but it's just kind of diverged from your strategy question quite a bit, but that's kind of where it starts. You start with that initial strategy of the twofold approach. Is a movie I'm making for myself, then I'm not worried about making something that sells as much, but I still try to make sure it'll sell. I don't want to lose, like if House Shark cost me $21,000, I didn't want to lose $21,000 on it. Matter of fact, I was sweating. So it was great to get all that money back and have a successful Indiegogo campaign pretty quick there. But if it's a movie that I'm producing, strictly as a producer, to put money into it, letting the filmmaker to reach his own vision, bring his own vision to life, with some financial help from me, then I go, okay, but this has to be something that sells for me if I'm going, it's almost guaranteed to be a good seller if I'm going to put money into it.
Yeah, I've actually done a few Indiegogo campaigns myself, and I did it, before it became like a thing, like it became like the word Kickstarter or crowdfunding became part of the lexicon, and basically. Mm-hmm. I always told people, like, once you start, making the perks, that are part of your campaign, you're realizing this is you have to kind of add that in beforehand. You have to actually start to calculate up all those numbers and add them into the budget. And then what you have, yep. What you need, what you really need, all that good stuff. And, that's something that, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's always a good reminder, about that stuff, because it's so easy to forget. You're focused on making a movie, and you're like, oh shit, now I gotta, But see, Ron, that's where your accounting degree comes in handy.
Sure, it does help a little bit. It's been a long time since I've taken accounting classes, but coming out of those and going almost right into business, for myself immediately. It helped. It made it easier for me to do at least my own bookkeeping. I won't do my own taxes. I'll let a professional accountant handle that, because they're up to date on the tax laws and all that sort of stuff. But it does help, with the bookkeeping and going, okay, is this something I can apply to the business, and how should it be applied?
That's true, Ron. And if they can get Al Capone, they can get anybody.
True, exactly.
So you mentioned some of the grindhouse movies, and you mentioned the some of the oversaturation of the market, and sometimes maybe the market's a little
Sure.
oversaturated, what have you. What are some of the grindhouse movies that you saw maybe when you were releasing She Kills, that you were kind of like maybe there's too many out there? Because I remember when Hobo with a Shotgun came out. I was at maybe Machete. I'm really glad to see movies like that, by the way, get like a wider release. I don't know how many kind of clones of those came out, but did you start to see like a lot of movies sort of in the space of where you were or were going in the Walmart space?
Well, I didn't expect She Kills to get into Walmart, and I didn't necessarily see too many of the grindhouse movies in the Walmart stores. But I think when I was releasing She Kills, Machete Kills had come out around the same time and hadn't done really well at the box office. But I mean, I'd seen so many low-budget movies, at least using that look, even if they didn't really have the, they weren't really trying to be grindhouse movies, but they liked that look, so they'd all the grain and scratch and stuff like that, but weren't really capturing the spirit of those movies. And then I'd also noticed a lot of movies that were trying to be grindhouse movies were really more like 80s, horror movies or action movies, using like a 70s grindhouse look by adding, again, like scratches and grains and stuff, and that's not really what the grindhouse movies look like. They were very unpolished. But I mean, what movies? I mean, you mentioned Hobo with a Shotgun. That was a good example. But that was a movie that had done really well. Father's Day was another one that had that grindhouse look, or at least aesthetic that people were associating with it. But outside of those, I'm trying to think what other ones I saw before that. I don't remember the low-budget titles. I just remember seeing that look so much. So I don't know if that really helped, if that really answered your question.
Well, you brought up some of the what I've seen a lot of recently is they're kind of like the throwback to the 80s. Now, I love the 80s. I love the 80s horror, and I love all that stuff. But now I think there's so many attempts by filmmakers nowadays to make something look like the 80s. You're starting to get this kind of oversaturation of the market. You know what I mean? And I think we kind of capped out at Stranger Things. And I think, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I kind of think now it's starting to get a little, I want to say repetitious. So
it could be on its way out for sure. I mean, I've noticed that, I think I saw like my first article on like 90s horror, were gaining, in popularity. The thing with 80s horror though is, it's one of the most, I think, iconic decades for horror. So if you make a cool horror movie that has, awesome, practical effects in it, a cool monster, carries that just sort of that vibe. You don't have to necessarily be like, hey, let me throw, like nods to video games or or video arcades or the clothing or whatever, into that. But you could still, there's a lot of great horror movies that capture the 80s vibe without, looking like they were made in the 80s. So, I mean, I think that's something that could never, get old if it's done right. But overdoing the nostalgia can certainly, burn itself out on any, before the 80s, the 70s, movies, not just the grindhouse, but, 70s horror in general was the hot topic, And then I see, it was a little more prevalent a year or so ago, but it still comes up. People were shooting movies on camcorders, old camcorders, to kind of capture that 90s, shot on video feel for their movies. And it's amazing you could shoot on an old camcorder and and come pretty close with just that alone to capturing that sort of vibe. But it's all revolving. There'll be another 5-10 years will be people in low budget, and then eventually moving up to big budget, doing nods to 2000 horror movies, and then the 2010 horror movies, and then it'll come back to the 70s again, or it's just these fads and rages hit, and sometimes it's based on the current status of the world or the country. It could be politically motivated. It could be could be anything, if we're facing war or, we're facing climate change, you might see more and more horror movies about that, but they're got a 70s or 80s or 90s, setting to them.
Yeah, very, and I think you're going to start seeing a lot of horror movies come out just about the political climate, and I'm not saying that like any particular party. I'm not saying, but I'm saying is the kind of how divisive the nation is right now. How that's what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? Just trying, that I think is going to be, which is why I think when the first Purge came out, I think that was, you want to talk about, wish fulfillment. I think a lot of people, not that they would, but maybe they kind of wish they could. One night we could just kill anybody. You know what I mean?
I know. It's an extension. I don't know. It's possible. When you're a director or actor or you're working in the creative fields, I think you had to be a little bit crazy. But I think a lot of horror filmmakers are more closer to activists, than anything. A lot of times they're trying to make a statement against, these things that anger them, lack of gun control and mass shootings, the Trump government, the worries over climate control, the abandonment of the arms treaty with Russia, raising the risk of potential war again, and we used to have the nuclear war used to hang over. I grew up in the 70s, and into the 80s, and the threat of nuclear war was always there, and that's, people, a lot of young people, they don't realize like how heavily that hung over society. So, yeah, and you're seeing it in this, like the Jordan Peele, horror movies, addressing social issues, are back to the forefront. So yeah, it does reflect the time. The movie Apostle, I thought was a really good movie. I hope I'm saying that right. I've heard other people pronounce it different. It looks like Apostle to me. The one on Netflix, addressed climate change. So yeah, people. Again, I think, like I said, the horror filmmakers are very much trying to make a statement as much as they're trying to tell you a story that is entertaining. It scares you or makes you laugh. Whatever, but in the end, a lot of them make you think, And
I mean, and you did one that's a very good, horror movie genre that to kind of put, political or cultural, protest or examination in, and that's the not only just horror in general, but also the zombie genre, the subgenre of horror. And I mean, if you look at Romero's, first 3 zombie films are all brilliant. You did Empire State of the Dead, and by the way, I want to say, this is a great idea, because I'm going to be one of those guys right now, Ron. I had an idea years ago similar, where you take like a bunch of different directors and you put them together. You know what I mean? And each one makes a segment. Yeah. But I think that's a brilliant idea, man. To do something like that. Just to...
Yeah, we should have done a little better, because I would have done, like a United States of the Dead sort of movie, and then World of the Dead or something, where we, encourage more shorts from other filmmakers. And maybe one day I will, but I was seeing so many people taking shorts and putting together, and the shorts didn't really have a common theme among them, and just turning them into anthologies. And I thought, we need, someone needs to do this with a wraparound. And I wasn't the first movie, producer or director ever to do that by any means. I'm saying, it was being done. VHS, I think, for the most part, was trying to tie all the stories together. But I wanted these to have a very direct theme. So when you put them all together, it felt like you're watching one movie, not a movie by a bunch of different filmmakers with a bunch of storylines that went in each direction. I wanted each story to kind of propel each individual short kind of propel the story forward. So, and then I saw what I had to work with, and from there I was like, okay, what's the wraparound story I can make? So I gave them set rules, which basically, for the most part, followed the Romero zombie rules. Set up, basically what's happened in the timeline, what they couldn't, go on to explore, like it was early on in the zombie apocalypse. They couldn't make it seem like it was like, deep into it or far end of it or whatever. And from there, I was like, and I had the basic idea I would do something like soldiers, trying to keep order and using those as cutaways. And it was a harder one to think of a theme for, because I mean all my movies do have like a subtext to them, almost just, straight across the board. But this was a harder one because I wasn't I was only contributing a small portion of the full project. But just the idea of the battle of the classes that would kind of emerge between the basically the government and the individual factions that would rise up, and we pretty much addressed one, but one of the other shorts kind of had its own like roving gang in it, and where this battle of power might lead to or evolve into.
Yeah, and. Yeah, and that's a great idea too, because you do see some of the shorts that really don't have anything, that kind of ties everything together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the one short, the girl in the apartment, faced with the monumental decision what to do with her sister who's died and is turning into a zombie, was very isolated. Even the one, when they were taking refuge, basically in the room. And find the dead body in there, very, very isolated, very, small, centered stories. In many ways, those actually were a little easier to plot out as opposed to the wider, expansive type of plots, in some of the shorts. But it gave a wide range of basically, situations that the populace was facing facing in the threat of this emerging zombie virus in society falling apart.
And when you released it, did it have the type of reception that you were hoping for?
Yeah, I mean the reviews for the most part seem to be positive. Everyone who worked on it, from the directors down on, to the actors and so forth, all seemed to enjoy it. I was overall pretty happy with it. Some of the stuff with the shorts, with the wraparound stuff I was shooting, it doesn't always come out the way you want it to. You're, tight on money, tight on time. I think that's the biggest one. Usually you're tight on time, so you shoot it one weekend and something's not quite working right. You don't have the option to go back and fix it. You kind of pretty much make the decision to fix it on set and hope it comes out okay. So it was a fun project to do. I enjoyed it. It wasn't one of the ones that was as close to my heart as the others, but I was pretty happy with it, and I'll usually start with that. Because sometimes, the audience might not like it as much as you did, but if you felt like you told the story you wanted to tell, I'm still pretty satisfied with that, So, but yeah, I mean, but I have people like you who have told me that they really enjoy it, and I'm always glad to hear, any movie that I've made resonates with the fans. My first movie, City of the Vampires, I still think it came out horrible, and it's not just because it's not the movie that I wanted to do, because I was falling apart along the way. My first feature, tried to take on way too much and lacked the skill to shoot that movie right. But I'll still get people who will tell me that they love it, and I'll just look at it and be like, I don't know what you love about it, but I'm glad that you do, because I would feel bad that you went out there and bought this movie and watched it and were like, oh, this is a piece of shit. I'm happy to hear that you went out and bought it. Hopefully you bought it, and watched it and got enjoyment out of it and continue to get enjoyment out of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you're very welcome, and for the everything, and it's just. I have a friend of mine who made a zombie film, and it did not hit with the zombie genre. And to him, I was like, dude, that's your key demographic right there, man. If you fail to get that, forget it. You're done.
Yeah, I think if you're going to go something specific as a zombie movie, then you do have to cater to the fans. Now, you could try to set them off balance and go in a different direction than they've seen before, and usually most fans will appreciate that. But sometimes, you got to be careful. There's limits, and but anyone who goes out there and really tries to do something different with a genre or subgenre, I applaud them, even if the fans didn't get it. Even if I didn't like it personally, I always appreciate that they at least tried it, because at least it gets you thinking about your own work, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and especially when you're making like something like specifically a zombie film, you have to. There is a specific expectation, for audiences, and and that's
sure.
And that's what I think they maybe missed. But it is what it is. But Ron,
if you go out and make a zombie movie with, say, no zombies in it or no brutal zombie killings, then yeah, you probably run the risk of, like, there's certain things you gotta put in there, So if you don't do that, then yeah, you run the big risk of your audience just being like, oh, that sucked. I love zombie movies, and you didn't have one good zombie gutting or something on it, So yeah, I agree with you there.
I had a friend. This is a true story. I had a friend who pitched a zombie film that had no zombies in it. And I sat there.
What's the idea of what's the zombie angle of it then if there's no zombies in it?
You hear them. So they're outside, you kind of hear them, they allude to them, but you never see one. And I said, is there at least a kill anywhere? He goes, no, there's no killing by the zombies. And I'm like, I don't think anyone's going to, want to buy. I don't think any producer is going to be like, yeah, that's great. I mean, maybe they'll save money on makeup, but I mean, would they really want to invest in something like that? I mean, so it was like a one location movie with zombies like surrounding the place. So you're hearing them scratch.
Maybe as a short or something. I mean, I could see it being real spooky, like a Bird Box, type of thing or something. But yeah, it's definitely a fine line. I'm not sure if it would work, but I love the idea of audience filling in the blanks, and they've certainly seen enough zombie movies that they could picture it. But yeah, that's a fine line. You got to really be skilled if you're going to pull that off and make it effective.
Yeah, it's needless to say, he never made it. So I think it was going to be such a fine line to walk. I don't really. The only person I think that could have pulled that off would have probably been somebody like George Romero. Because he went full tilt the first three. Maybe he made Land of the Dead. Maybe he and on the rest of those. Maybe that was the next evolution. I don't know. But I think
I was gonna say take like a Hitchcock or something. I think to pull that off because I mean you definitely need a master of you need someone who's a master of not showing the monsters. Someone playing with everything else, the sounds and the and having the audience fill in the blank, building up the suspense and tension.
Yeah. And or maybe even somebody like Christopher Nolan or somebody like that. Just somebody to kind of So, but Ron, I just I know we're running out of time, but the one movie I wanted to talk about, which actually got us talking, is House Shark. Okay. I saw the trailer. It was up to like, what is it, almost 1 million views now?
Yeah, past 1 million views, I think like a week or so ago. It was right around the time I announced that it was getting close, and then suddenly it was over, like really quick. So, yeah, that was, I mean, it was in part due to the fact that MovieWeb covered it and hosted and everything, but it was cool to have a trailer reach that milestone.
So, and congrats, by the way, that is huge.
Thank you.
So, Ron, like, where was the impetus for House Shark? In writing it, because I know you wrote it, you produced and directed it. So, where was the impetus or sort of that idea to come up with this?
Well, I'd always, as I mentioned earlier, I think as part of this conversation, I was saying how I'd always wanted to do a shark movie. I was like, I want to come up with the Jaws sequel. That is the awesome sequel. I mean, I love all the Jaws movies in cheesy ways for 3 and 4. I wouldn't put them in my top movies, but 2 definitely is one of I think is a underrated movie. But I was trying to come up with a plot, like how could I do bring Jaws back and make it very cool, and even like a year or so before I started working on House Shark, I thought like we have a Lake Ontario near me, which you can't see across. I was like, man, I could shoot on Lake Ontario and make it look like an ocean. Try to come up with a simple idea, that was still effective, that could be done within a budget, within my budget levels, and make, a cool shark movie. And then it was actually during the winter time, and I tell this story all the time. It's not like a great story, but this is really how it came across. Is we had this, it had been freezing temperatures for like a week or two straight, and all this ice had built up on the roof of the houses, and my house in particular, I'd get these loud booming noises. And so when I looked up, I found out it was like the ice actually cracking, on the roof. And I made a comment online about it, and some, some of my friends on Facebook were making comments back, and we're joking back and forth. And eventually, I made this joke of zombies on an ice or zombies on a roof. A movie that was basically like there's a zombie invasion, but all the zombies basically I'll just live on the roofs of your houses. So they weren't really much of a threat. But as soon as I said that, I came with that. That popped in my head was house shark in a house, And it hit me right there. I remember I texted my producer. I said, I got the title for my next movie. It's called House Shark. It's about a shark in a house, but it's done like a shark out in the water, except it's within a house. I was like, holy cow, I could do my shark movie that I've wanted to do, and I can control the location, which is a big deal, when we work this low budget and, you lack funds to have places, unlimited stretches of time or even necessarily very long periods of time to be able to shoot it, look at it, cut it together real quick, go, okay, what's wrong, and go back and fix it, And so, and then, in Syracuse, sometimes I forget how crazy the weather can be here because, we'll have days that are super hot and no clouds, and so you're getting these heavy shadows, and it's so hard to shoot outside, especially it comes around midday out here, without fill lights and bounce lights. So you can't really just go on location and shoot, run and gun it quick. It takes a little bit more effort than that. You can't necessarily shoot in shadows because everything's blown out, and then you'll have tons of rain for days, and then you'll have, be super cold and snowy and heavy snow, and then when you want the snow, we'll get like a crazy early thaw or a series of warm days. It's just all over the place. It's, the weather is just a nightmare. So to be able to shoot inside a house and control it, just so much was appealing about it. But I thought it was a fun idea. I completely ran. Originally, it was going to be more like a kid's movie. My son had always given me a hard time about not being able to watch any of my movies, and I was going to make a movie that was safe for him to watch, and it was going to be done very much in the style of that Super 8 short, like a Super 8 short, but like the Super 8 short at the end of Super 8 that they showed. Very cheesy. Going for a lot of humor, completely playing off the idea of what it is. It's a shark in a house. I wasn't going to take it that serious. But I didn't shoot that first summer I was intending to. And over the course of the next year of revisiting it, I made it more and more grown up. But it still maintained very much that sort of kid sense. I wanted it to feel like a movie I was making if I had a film camera or a camcorder back in the late 70s or early 80s, and got all my friends around the neighborhood to come and help me make a shark movie. So it started as that, and then just rolled from there.
So when did you actually, decide that to put everything, all the production dates together and stuff like that? I mean, I imagine you kind of had to say, all right, I'm shooting this in my house. I can control the location, but I'm sorry, Ron, are you married?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. So that actually helps out then. Because I thought you. I was like, I was just thinking. I was like, hey, I don't know if you are or not. And I was like, okay, because I can imagine that would have to. That's a whole other conversation, of being like, well, I had to tell my wife she couldn't come home.
Yeah, hopefully you're with someone who doesn't mind you doing that. And I mean, when I have been shooting and was dating someone or with somebody, I never really ran into many issues with that. For the most part, it was pretty clear early on. Like, I love making movies, and this is what I'm going to be doing. And in most cases they would actually be on set or trying to help out and that sort of stuff. So that hasn't been a big issue. And originally I wasn't going to shoot it in my house. I was trying to find a house to shoot at, and eventually it just made sense. I was like, if I shoot in my house, I don't have to pay for a location. We're all there. We literally get up, go downstairs, start shooting it. So all that sort of stuff just kind of came together throughout the process. But I don't remember what year, I don't remember what year I shot it off the top of my head. I'd have to go go and look. But I know, like I said, the summer before I was going to start shooting it, and things weren't coming together fast enough for me to feel like, okay, I'm comfortable shooting right now. So let me take a year off and just develop it some more and take some more time to, get the things I need. And like I said, a lot just changed, in that process. But once you do set a date, and eventually somewhere along the way, I settled on doing like the 3 separate chunks of shooting. We shot in August, then we shot in March, and then we shot in August again. So shooting over the course of a year, which was, fairly stressful because you always worry about, losing an actor or something along the way. The people I work with, they're always trying to get their acting gigs, or there's a chance they can move so far away you can't get them, or whatever, But it allowed me to also make the movie a little more leisurely. It was a bigger project. It was a much bigger project than I originally intended. I was going to do it for a few $1,000s, and that's always the plan. With every movie, I'm going to make this cheap and quick for a few $1,000s, and then as you play around with it, and work with it, and expand on it, the budget keeps growing and growing, and the ideas grow and grow. And suddenly, I went from having basically a very simple shark to a more elaborate shark, and more scenes added to the movie, and it was very much like almost being back on City of the Vampires, going like, okay, I have to do too much stuff on this set. I'm lighting it, and I had people help with the lighting, but I was still in charge of the lighting. And when they weren't there, which, people weren't always there, I still had to go out and move the lights. So when you're setting up the camera, setting up the shot, and you're like, oh, these lights aren't perfect, and we're putting all the lights outside and shining them in, I'd have to go outside, go around, adjust them. If I didn't have someone to check them on the inside for me, then I have to come back in and recheck them. Or if someone I was sending outside who was supposed to, adjust them wasn't getting it right, I'd be looking through the camera. I'm trying to, tell them, where to adjust it to, and sometimes they're just not getting it. Between that, it's physically exhausting. Focus so much on the shots, you're not always focused on the acting. It just it's when you're doing these low budget movies, it's you wear a lot of different hats, and it's exhausting, but it's still fun. I mean, we had a great time on that set, and that's another big reason to enjoy doing it.
Definitely, Ron. And then you finally get to that spot where you're like, what the hell? Why the hell did I start doing this?
It's always those first couple of days where I'm like, oh, I made a horrible mistake. And you're like, I'm in way over my head. Let me just cancel this production, regroup, and I'll, restart in another week or two. And then you're just like, no, I got to push forward. And then you hit you start hitting your stride, 3-4 days in, and then suddenly, everything's going smooth, and you rattle your stuff off quick, and you're going back and fixing some of the stuff, you did wrong early on, and next thing you know, it's all done, and then you fall into depression because you're not on a movie set anymore,
Yeah, right. And because when you're on the movie set, you're like, you're actually doing it. There's no thinking like, am I actually making something?
Yeah.
No, because you are. You can feel it. You know what I mean? Then when
you're really kind of like living the dream at that point. You don't have to. I mean, most cases I still have to do like a little work every morning to keep things going, but in most part you're able to get away from your regular job, be on a set, you're laughing, you're with your friends, you're eating, a good food all day, and it's like being on vacation, except you're with a camcorder and you're telling people what to do, And then it gets all done, and then you're like, oh, shoot, I got to go back to sitting in front of my computer every day.
Right. Exactly, right? You're like, I need this high again. How the hell do I get there again?
Yeah. And I need to make back all that money I just spent. I need to
and it starts all hitting you.
Make more money to pay bills, And so, it's just, it'd be great, someone paid for the production and paid for you to then take the rest of the year off. What are the chances?
Right? Yeah, that's when you're really living the dream, man. That's when you've made it. Ron, I know we're almost out of time. We've been talking for about an hour now. So Ron, just to sort of put a period at the end of this conversation, do you have anything you'd like to say to kind of finalize everything?
If you're looking for like a last minute advice or something, I guess not.
Just whatever.
I've done that so many times. You could definitely look up old interviews and stuff. But if you wanted to track me down and stuff, look, srscinema.com is the website. You can definitely follow me on Facebook. It's probably where I'm most active. Instagram too. And if you my personal profile is maxed out. It's tougher for me to friend request everyone, but the SRS Cinema Facebook page is a great spot to stay up to date on what I'm doing. There's also like the House Shark and She Kills individual pages, and trying to think what else, a little bit on Twitter, but any of the social media places work. And looks up, see, I release a lot of other movies from filmmakers all around the world. And so not only are you supporting, my little distribution company by picking up these movies and checking them out, you are also supporting these filmmakers because, the more stuff, if I do well with them, I can license more works from them. In some cases, I can pay them to make movies, and you're helping other filmmakers, sometimes hundreds of filmmakers, live their little part of the dream too.
And and that's a very good point, Ron. And everybody, I'm going to link to everything Ron and I talked about in the show notes. I know House Shark
thank you.
Hey, my pleasure, Ron. I know House Shark is actually on Amazon Prime right now. I'm going to make sure to link to that in the show notes as well. By the way, Ron, I don't know who did your poster, but that's exactly what the poster should have been. That is on the money because you know why? It's intriguing. It explains the movie, and it stops people in their tracks and goes, what the hell is that?
It does, catch a lot of attention. I actually paid a lot of money for that work to get done, but I knew there was a chance of getting into Walmart, and it really needed killer art to make it happen. So, so sometimes you got to put it out there. But I try to apply it to the project. I think the project has. I always try to do the illustrated artwork for the limited edition release that we do, and I do a lot of those. Where it's only 50, 100, or 200 units. Sold directly from the site. Pretty much exclusively. Sometimes I'll list them, the leftovers on Amazon, and might move, 5, 10 more copies there or something like that. But for the most part, you get them from my site with illustrated art because that's what the fans that are close to SRS like the best. But then we'll do what's called like the real art, with the actors, or in the case of House Shark, with the shark and the real house and stuff for the wide releases because that's what the retailers like to have on their store, their shelves and stuff. So, you just, like I said, you apply a strategy to each release, depending on what you're doing with each release at the time.
Right. Yeah. You're always trying to, get as much eyeballs as possible. And I think whatever, and again, this poster is does exactly that. Because I remember a couple years ago, I actually had a friend of mine who, when he went to like AFM and all those different places, and he was talking about pitching, and he goes, Dave, if there's one thing I learned, he's like, if you don't have a killer poster that sums up the movie in just one image, he's like, you're sunk, no matter what it is.
Yeah, you got to start there. The title and the image, and then they want a good, short synopsis, having a killer trailer, like a 1 minute trailer that just shows the money shots from the movie, and then they might not even ever look at the movie. If they love your artwork and they love your trailer, you can be in Redbox, you could be potentially in Walmart or Family Video or Best Buy or whatever, based off of just that stuff. It also helps if you have a genre that they like Walmart does real well with these sorts of movies. Where Redbox, House Shark hasn't got into Redbox, probably never will, because Redbox likes more serious horror. So if you have a serious a paranormal horror movie with killer artwork and a great trailer, then you increase your chances of getting it out on Redbox.
Yeah, right. And again, we go talk about all those different streaming platforms and what they're all looking for, and But I guess you know what, Ron. Let's save that for the next conversation. Whenever your next film comes out, you let me know. You can come back on, and we'll keep this conversation going, Ron.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Anytime, everyone. It's at DaveBullis.com. Twitter, it's DB Podcast. I really don't use my personal Twitter anymore. Ron Bonk, thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.